His keyboard just has a 1 and a 0 on it though too, so yeah.
I was really hoping to see one of the old ones, right?
Okay, we'll get started. Stokes is just gonna take over for me. Beautiful. That's spoilers. And 2%. Okay. So welcome. Thanks for coming and joining. Today we're going to be talking about developer workflows, as you know. So the reason we wanted to do this today was I think we've all kind of felt just a massive shift, but also a little anxiety, just like, what are we doing every day? Because it's shifted almost every week. And then last week, there was a big bombshell that everything is going to cost $1 million to do everything you're doing right now. So we're going to be talking about that just a little bit. But a couple things before. Next month, I'm going to be talking about Aspire, just some of the full stack developments, and doing some in-depth exploration of how I've been using it to build full stack apps, and just what does Aspire actually leverage and allow you to do. If you are interested in Aspire and don't want to wait till next month, Kevin gave a great .NET Conf on it, just going over a lot of the service defaults and things that it kind of gets out of the box. So that's going to be next month, 5 p.m. here. So first Tuesday of the month every month. Hope to see you there. But diving into today's discussion, we're just going to be talking briefly through each of our different workflows. So these are the topics I'm going to cover. So I'm going to be talking about the Copilot CLI and then plugins. Stokes, you're going to be talking about the Dev Squad and local AI and some other fun stuff. Kevin will be talking about the GitKraken orchestrator. He has GitKraken socks, GitKraken jacket, a shirt, so he's paid to do this. And then Ben is going to be going a little bit into skills with some MCPs and some VS Code features. But the real reason that we're excited to have everyone here is just a discussion about AI development broadly in 2026. So we're going to kind of run through our workflows just to spark some of the conversation, and then we'll sit down and then everyone will be invited to talk, and we'll kind of go the direction that people are interested in or have questions. So hopefully the overall workflows or whatever makes sense, we can just go from there. So we're going to start with Stokes. He's going to be talking about what his setup is and how it changed today.
Yeah, what my setup was? Yeah, exactly.
You want to plug in?
I'll plug in one. Okay, we'll start with this one, I guess. Yeah, we'll start here. Ooh, I'm not that tall. I wish I was one of the tall kids. I'm not. Okay, so this kind of started as I had this idea a while back. I think it was 2 user groups ago. I was sitting in the back with Seth, actually, and I sat there and I said, hey, the AI thing, right? How do you know what agent to pick, and how do you know when to do all this other fun stuff? And am I not even, yeah, so let's do remind me later. See, I plugged in, and now it's not even going to work for me. Here is it, Dan. Oh, no, it says I'm screen sharing. Here we go. Let's stop extending. Let's change it. Let's just share the entire screen. Start mirroring. See, we didn't, like Kevin said, I didn't QA this thing. Okay, that says I'm mirroring, but I'm not mirroring, am I, Dan?
That's my screen.
Yeah.
No.
Awesome. Okay. This might be a quick talk then, too. Let's just go HDMI then instead of this guy. Because when all else fails, Mac still has these old ports. So.
Except for I.
Yeah.
No. I don't have another feed.
Really?
No.
Okay. Well, this guy says I've got. Let's stop mirroring again. Okay. Well, let's try. You know what? If all else fails, I'll just go to my other one. Choose content. Entire
computer.
Start. I know.
You all put on the 80 computer.
Close this one. That's okay. I'll just keep talking. So yeah, so this whole thing kind of cropped up where I was trying to have a conversation with Seth, and because I was trying to old dog, new tricks. What is this AI concept? What is this AI thing, right? And so I saw, oh, awesome Copilot. That should do everything I needed to do and then some. Are you kidding me? Well, that's a pretty pink screen, though. That really messed things up. And so I was asking him, I sat there and I said, now, what are you using with regards to like when to pick the right agent and all this other stuff? And so I got, oh yeah, that's not even gonna be close. Okay, we're just gonna handle it for now. I'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
I'll just Teams message everything and
Yeah,
we'll
if you want,
stuff.
yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
See, I figured, okay, with 2 Macs, I should at least be able to like equate to 1 PC, right? But no, so where I'm going with this whole thing was, I didn't know when to pick like, okay, awesome Copilot, you had all these agents, you had all these skills, you had all this stuff, right? And it's like, where do I start? I was so overwhelmed, and I looked at Seth, I said, Seth, what do you do? I said, because I just got excited about this, and he said, oh yeah, you're not even looking at the right metrics when you're trying to do your agent stuff. Because I was, oh, I know nothing about SQL Server. Let me go find a SQL agent, right, and run it against this. And he goes, yeah, but that's not even keeping track of the right metrics. So all of a sudden then, I was driving down to my parents' house beginning of April. I had my whole talk planned, like during the drive down to my parents' house in April, because I was listening to a podcast. And this Brady Gasker dude at Microsoft wrote what I thought was going to be a really cool tool called Squad. I don't know, has anyone heard of the Squad AI stuff? We got a couple people. So I sat there, I'm like, brilliant. And I just started messing around with that the whole month of April. And I'm like, this is awesome. I can sit here, I don't have to care what an agent is. It's going to, I say, create a team for me that can do X, Y, and Z. And he goes, oh, I'll give you a front-end guy, and a back-end guy, and a database guy, and a QA guy. And then I say, okay, go write this. And he goes, boom, let me go parallel task this out to everything. And it was awesome because it was also using GitHub, I mean, it was using the Copilot license, right? Which was the request-based. I'm part of the reason probably why licensing changed, because I sat there and I said, okay, you know what, I want all of my agents to use Opus 4.6 for every single thing. And it sat there and said, fine. But when I asked my question, I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask the question to Sonnet, and then Sonnet spins off 4 or 5 Opus 4.6 agents, and he says, you paid for 1 request. I'm like, yes, right? I mean, I figured out how to hack the system, it was awesome. And then Microsoft, like a week and a half, went, yeah, just kidding, we're now paying you. You now have to pay for everything you're using. And I started, if I could share my screen, I started to see like inside my squad when I sent it out, and I would exit out of a request, I sat there and said, 5 million tokens for your UI guy, and 5 million tokens. I sat there and I said, okay, awesome, I can do 1 squad request and use up my whole token usage for the month. Because I was looking at the pricing, right, and it's like, oh, $40 I think is what we get through Intellitek through the enterprise stuff, and it's like, okay, you get $40, and then you look and go, okay, so it's Opus, I think that was $5 for every million, so I'm now using 10 million for 1 request, and I'm like, that's not gonna work for me. So I decided to, let's explore other tools, so that's kind of what I was doing, and so yes, I have, like I said, multiple Macs here that I can't even hook up, but I will have wonderful conversations with you all on, and I can share things out. But I finally figured out, because I was then sitting there going, okay, well, how can I still use Squad and do local LLMs, right? Olama's a cool thing. Went out, bought a new Mac. It's got all kinds of memory and everything else on it. I did the 64 gigs and M5 Max and all that stuff. And I went, okay, let me do this. And I fire up Olama, and I keep getting like these 500s. AI is just saying, nope, sorry, you can't do this. So after about, and that's what I was going to kind of show, was I think I figured out the Olama magic in order to figure out how do I set my context window to the right size, and how do I tell Copilot, oh, by the way, use this as your context window. And I actually got an app up and running today, which was fantastic. And it used, because at first it was like, okay, one of the first things you do with Squad is say, okay, go craft my team. And I'd sit there, typical Intellitek thing, craft me a team with Princess Bride characters, right? And it starts picking 4 random characters. And I think it got Inigo most of the time, but then I had like a Frederico one time, and I'm like, what? How are you coming up with these names? So I finally got it. So that was my test today, right? Was, can I actually get Olama to generate at least a Princess Bride? And I did. I got a Princess Bride squad. It was fantastic. And then I sat there and I said, okay, now implement this feature. And after about an hour and a half to 2 hours, because it's a lot slower, I'm not gonna lie, a lot slower, I had a feature. And I'm like, this is brilliant. And then I sat there and I asked another question, okay, let's move on to phase 2 and do this. And it came back probably within 15 minutes with an implementation. Wow, why an hour and a half versus 15 minutes? I haven't changed anything. Let's do another one. And then all of a sudden I start looking, and I asked AI, and I sat there and said, are you even using Squad for any of these tasks? And sat there and said, oh no, I ignored that directive, and I've just been doing this all by myself because it just seemed too easy to, instead of spinning up all these other agents. Do you want me to do that? It's like, Guess not, because it's a lot faster not to, right? So I'm finding that AI is a lot of fun, where it's like, are you sure? Are you doing what I told you to do? And it's like, no, and I did. I was messing around with this with my parents, and because my dad is a computer guy too, right? COBOL programmer, so AI is really odd to him and everything else, and well, anything web is odd to him, but yeah. I sat there and I said, Dad, this is great, come back here. And he looks at my screen and goes, what are you reading? I sat there and said, this is the argument that AI is having with itself. It's fantastic. Because I sat there and I said, okay, because Squad does sit there and say, as the initial coordinator agent, you need to hand everything else off. And you're not supposed to do anything. And so it sat here for a good paragraph on my screen saying, I know I'm supposed to hand off this task, but it's a real simple task, but my directive says I'm not supposed to do any task, no matter how simple it is, but I really want to just do this. So the non-deterministic stuff of AI is amazing, right? But I did. I finally got it working locally. So I can go over some of the process that I did for that, because there were a couple things you had to configure in Llama and a couple things you had to configure in Copilot. And if I could get any of these to share, I'd show you that. But I will say, so the other piece that I also kind of dug into, which as just now a separate tool to think of, I'm not trying to say anti-Microsoft or anything like that, but I'm a Mac guy. I don't know. I know, boo. Yes, exactly.
Here.
Thank you, Austin. See, I know I had one in the crowd. Yeah. But so AWS, Amazon has had. I think they started out with. I can't remember what the initial thing was, but they always had this tool that you could install inside of your command prompt that basically gave you IntelliSense in your command prompt. It started out. I mean, like it went from QCLI to now Curo. Is now the piece that it uses, and it's great. You CD space, and it kind of just does a drop down of whatever directories you have. Well, come to find out, they've now decided to jump onto the AI bandwagon as well. And so now you can actually have a Curo IDE or a Curo CLI, which mimic so the Curo IDE it's a spin-off of Visual Studio Code, right? So I'm not even, let's not even pretend that it's not. You can see Visual Studio Code. In fact, when you install it, it says, do you want to import your settings? And it's like, no, I want to still just try to do this through Curo. But where I'm going with the whole thing was, it was an interesting way, because I've noticed that when I've been doing AI programming, I've always kind of been doing the, okay, do this task, and it goes off and does. I'm bad at the, oh, let me do a plan, and then let me do this. And I think now with where we're going with the whole, oh, you have to now spend thousands of dollars for tokens instead of just iterate and burn millions of tokens, no big deal, right? It was interesting because Curo kind of forces you down the path of, it forces you to kind of do a plan. And then it sits there and says, okay, now let me come up with a to-do list of your plan. And now let me actually iterate over and write the code on that, right? So it was more of this, and I found I was even finding that, I was trying to do that even with Copilot CLI. I was doing a lot of, let me type into my, like just notepad basically to come up with the prompt and then copy and paste that into the CLI, because I couldn't just, my mind doesn't think this way of, oh, here, I can easily put this down in like 2 sentences. Okay, do this, and here's how I want this class to look, and all the fields I want. I don't want you to like try to think too much. So, and I end up, and it's like, oh man, I was supposed to hit Shift Enter instead of Enter. Now Copilot's going off. I need to start typing to correct it, and right. So I found I started now doing these prompts just inside Notepad. Well, Curo kind of forces you to do that anyway. So it was actually kind of neat. In fact, one of the options that you get inside their CLI is you can do /editor, and it just brings up, now granted on a Mac, yes, if you're on Windows, because it does now work on Windows, so I know for a long time it was not a Windows app, they've just released one for Windows, so this all works on Windows, but if you do /editor in Windows, it brings up Notepad. If you do /editor in, on a Mac, it's going to use VI. So, but you basically now, inside of your prompt, instead of just having to have this small little window that you type in, it's your full screen, and you can actually type the whole thing and then do the, escape, :WQ, and then that now sends it off, right? So you are still, even inside the CLI, you're being able to write these documents. The thing that was nice about the IDE too was it saves off those documents. So you get this requirements document, you get this planning document, so you can see everything that was done, and it's actually something, it's just markdown files that then get checked in with your code too. So one thing too that's nice about that, and I mean now this is where you cover it up, right? Because you don't want them to catch on to the fact that their pricing model is way better than what Copilot's going to be here in like a month. So, and I don't want to call it request-based. I can't remember exactly what their term is. But for now, I'm trying to figure out, okay, for personal projects, what am I going to do? Because I'm not spending $1,000 a month for tokens for personal projects, right? It's $20 a month for, I want to say, they call it kind of like 1,000 requests, but requests are to a degree like what Microsoft is doing, where certain models are, oh, it's a 1x or a 2x or something like that. But even when you do the 1x, I only made one question, but I would still burn like 30 requests type of thing, right? So it's still not a one-to-one like what Microsoft was, but I will say if it's something that you're interested in, they do a 50 credit per month free plan as well. Something to look into. So just another option. If you sat there and went, oh, sorry, Copilot, that's out of my price range now for when we hit June 1st. It's another thing to look at. So yeah, on that I will step away, and I'm sorry I couldn't get any of this. See, this is why. At least you've tested. Yeah, I plugged in. I'm like, oh, it extends. I'm good. I just didn't have these on. So yeah. But yeah, no. So just some other options, and yeah, I'm totally open to questions, and I will definitely figure out a way to share how I've got my Olama variables all set up, and then how I actually have Copilot set up, so you can kind of do all the fun math on tokens and all that other. Well, context window is really the big part, right? So once you get that. I found out once I could tweak that just right, things worked a lot better. But yeah. Yes, Reese.
So are you continuing to use the Olama setup, or is that just like an experiment you're doing?
I am going to continue to use it. So yeah, come up here closer to the microphone, because I think we've got that mic still working, but I'm not sure.
You're good wherever you want to stand.
Okay. So yeah, no, I am still going to use it. So I've got a 64 gig laptop. The big thing is, so the Olama piece was nice, but like people always say, it's about 6 to 8 months behind where the models are now, right? So, I mean, everyone always kind of talks of, oh my gosh, so much change right around November, December timeframe of last year, right? That made AI kind of possible for doing a lot of stuff. Well, I'm back, with the Olama, you're still kind of now back in the September, October timeframe, right? So it's good, but like even today when I was trying to do something, it actually hand wrote a EF migration for me instead of did the .NET EF migrations add. It just created the C# file for my migration. I'm like, no, that's not right. We need to use the tools instead. But I will say though, yeah, there are some really good models out there that interact with the tools well. Like I've got Context 7 and Playwright MCP and stuff like that. So it does do that. Now your context window too on a lot of these are only 256,000 bytes. I guess it's bytes, yeah. 256K. So 256,000. So like a lot of the Opus and all that stuff now, they're 1 million. So you do notice your conversation gets compacted more often and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it's definitely doable. But yeah, like I said too, the speed on it is maybe 4 to 5 times as long, if not even longer. Now, I will say, yes, I love my Mac, but for the price of the Mac, I just found like this, and I'm not plugging NVIDIA here, but NVIDIA has this nice little, can't remember what it was called. I know I've got it up on my laptop.
The DGX Spark.
Thank you. Yes, the DGX Spark. Yes, 128 gigs of VRAM, 4 terabytes of hard drive space. It's running like one of the latest Blackwell GPUs in it and stuff like that. That's supposed to, and it was funny because I was even sitting here, I was talking to Dan about this. I sat there and said, oh, all the specs, and you can even daisy chain these things. You can get 2 of them, right? So now you can do 256 gig of, and you're like, oh my gosh, when would I ever need something like that? Because I sat there and I'm like, one of these DGX Sparks actually has, I think it says it can handle up to like a 200 billion parameter model. I'm like, brilliant. I mean, come on, let's be real. Well, then I started reading articles on like Opus and stuff like that. They're like 3 to 5. They haven't opened up what they are, but apparently people are speculating they're like a 3 to 5 trillion parameter model. So the window is still really small, even when you're sitting there saying it can handle like 200 gig windows. So yeah, but yeah, no, I definitely am going to continue with the Olama piece, but it might be something that I kick off, let it run overnight, and then look at it the next morning type of thing. Yeah, but yeah, definitely something to pursue. Okay, I'll let Dan come up and.
Thank you for
do his
stalling.
At least your screen works. Yeah.
Yeah, my screen works.
I stalled so you could get what I can't get working. Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple things. So we put the cart before the horse here because Stokes was talking a lot about local AI usage, right? So what does it look like to?
Very funny. What did I literally plugged it in.
How? Okay, whatever. But so a lot of AI usage is really going to be boiling down to the tokens you're using in the context. So the reason we're talking about this is because if people aren't aware, GitHub has basically changed their whole pricing schema to say, no longer are you premium request based, which was saying each call I make to the API, that is one request, or depending on the model, like 3x or whatever. They've changed it to now be token based. So costs are just going up because people realize they're not making any money on these things. So just a lot of things are shifting in the next couple months. I think once June 1st hits, we might be at the end of the parade. But that's okay, right? We'll go back to normal coding. We can all go back to having a keyboard at our desk again.
We'll be like Kenny. We'll actually just program by hand.
Yeah, like a caveman. But so, like I said, we put the cart before the horse here. But so I wanted to go over, and what a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is just what my setup is and what the sort of things that I do on a daily basis. So what you see up here is plugins. So we, as IntelliTech, we put together some collections of like what we find helpful for GitHub extensions. So plugins are a new thing because of course they are, but you can add them as like a marketplace. So down below, you can do the installation where it's like a Copilot plugin install, or you can add the marketplace. So those kind of things. But really, what we found is that so much of AI usage is about the context. So the big things that I'm going to show, and I originally had this in a nice markdown file, computer network, whatever. But so some of the big usages of AI, I think a lot of it boils down to AI started to take shortcuts, and we started to notice that it's not writing the same quality software that you can write in hand. And now there's trade-offs of when do I go to AI for writing code? When do I actually review every single line of code, right? If I'm writing a prototype app, that's very different than I'm making a change to an enterprise-grade, massive repository that is scrutinized at every line, right? But I think it's important that as we continue to learn how to use AI and continue to work with AI, we not only still hold that like same rigor of, hey, lines of code is never going to be a good quality metric. Like, how many lines of code did I write today, right? I could spit out a lot of crap with AI really quickly. But to write actually well-engineered code, this is promptified. This is not codified good code, right? This is just saying, hey, please use engineering principles and practices that we know from computer science, right? The solid principles, or dry, or correct over easy. Like, those things we can say, hey, AI, please do this. And then it can turn around and say, oh, I just disregarded everything I ever knew about good programming. So that's the one thing, is like I have all these instruction files and I was going to send them out. Like, I prefer conventional commits. I find it easy to look through the history, and especially now with Copilot, you can iterate really quickly on commits. I want them to always use conventional commits. Just so if it does this huge long feature, it's not just going to be a crap or a really long, overly verbose commit, right? It could say, I changed this file at lines, like I don't actually care about that. Like, I want to actually have usable things that I can look back through the Git history. And then the final one is a little different, but I've found over the past 4 months, as I've really dove into AI and using it, that like part of me still feels a little bit of the guilt. Still feels a little bit of the engineering loss that I have of like, I didn't write this code. I generated it, I reviewed it, I validated it, I tested it, but it's still not mine. And there's still a little bit of that, I don't know the hot paths, I don't know the exact kind of like reasons behind certain lines of code. So I more recently been like, well, as we need to become more judicious about our token usage and more judicious just in general about AI, we should be using it to learn. And one of the things about AI is if you don't let it learn with you, or if you just let it go, do the approve all and just go off with coding, you're not going to learn anything. So just some things of checking yourself when you're actually writing code is, well, am I the one making the decisions? Am I the one steering the architecture? Those are still really important things, right? That's at a certain level, we're becoming more valuable in that way, right? The critical thinking, the taste, the ability to like sense something is wrong in the code is just becoming more important. So this is all to say, I have all these things. Maybe they're helpful, but probably not, because they're going to change in 6 months. But moving more into the marketplace, we've put together some of the things that we've used in like Case Amplify, which is a larger project we have here that's a product, or other things that I've pulled together with Stokes, of just things that we found helpful. So if that's helpful, we have this marketplace, and there's a lot of great marketplaces. So Awesome Copilot now has transitioned to a marketplace as opposed to just downloading markdown files or copy pasting. But we can talk about that more once we get further on, but I don't want to take too much time. So next is going to be Kevin talking about kind of a level up from what we've been talking about, just like we're talking about markdown files going into your VS Code or specific things, and Kevin has gatecrashing, so whatever gatecrashing is.
No, so alternate name for this talk is how to get yourself rate limited. Because that's how you know when you're doing good. If you're not getting rate limited, are you really co-piloting? Okay, so yeah, kind of like Dan was saying, and aside from the coloring looks really weird.
Yeah, my Mac tried to do that too.
I don't know why the coloring looks so wacky. So aside from the
Retro.
that, wow.
Are you running CGA graphics?
You're gonna,
Contrast there.
Dan, low points. We're gonna try the USB-C and just see if that makes it better rather than straight HDMI, but something tells me.
Clayton's computer actually had the same thing where he needed the adapter.
To go through and do.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing the thingy. It's doing the sizey thingy. It is now coming up. Wow, that is horrible. Okay, sorry, quick section on this. And then we will go through and do. So one of the things, and I think we're just going to cheat and do this. And it doesn't work. Okay, great. Worried it was going to be easy. That would make my life way too simple and straightforward.
You got the same pinkification I did.
Yeah, and it's all kinds of messed up. What have we done to our color profiles that has messed up our world? So, I'm going to just blaze ahead with the different color profiles because I don't know that it's going to make that big of a difference for me. So we're going to just go big, and then I'm going to get myself into demo mode and switch over here. So, one of the things that I think is hopefully a common pattern that people have seen is how we go through and deal with these agents. Because I think the last time we did a big Copilot talk, it was focused on like Copilot inside of VS Code, and we've got Copilot CLI, and there's Copilot inside of Visual Studio. And these are all bearing the same name, but have very different functionality. So the thing that I've told people, I think a bunch for the last month, is my opinion is the CLI is probably one of the better ones to go and play with. Mostly because it puts you in a different mindset, right? It has not necessarily anything to do with the functionality of that particular Copilot, and everything to do with the fact that once you are inside of a terminal, you are now thinking agent first rather than code first as your mentality. When I'm in Visual Studio or VS Code, I'm very much in code mode. That is my development happy place. That is where I want to be. How crazy do we want to get? Nah, I've already done 2 updates. So with a lot of this, with these CLIs, because Copilot has their CLI, Claude has their CLI, and otherwise, there then comes this question of how am I going to manage these agent sessions, right? I can spin different tabs and start running, but that doesn't always work well. Specifically when I've got my repository, agents like to think they are the only acting on the repository. I had Visual Studio open earlier today and a Copilot CLI process running against that same repository, and it went, you know what? That file is locked by Visual Studio. I'm terminating that process. And I went, you jerk. I was in the middle of that. Because it really wants to be the thing that is in control. It was given a task. It's working towards success. And if something gets in its way, it's going to try to work through that with as much permissions as you've given it. And in my case, YOLO. So it actually, terminated my process and moved on. But with that said, oftentimes with running agents fairly autonomously, letting them act, we want to put guide rails around them, right? Oftentimes our source control becomes one guide rail. If it goes crazy, I can always revert, pull it back and say, no, that is definitely not what we're doing. Or otherwise, right? We don't allow it to just push into main, right? We're going to force it to go through pull requests, all that usual DevOps stuff that we have. With that said,
my favorite Git Kraken. They were kind enough to give me a release earlier today. So these bits are about 3 hours old. So we'll see how that goes. Specifically, the big thing here that I will highlight to people is they have a course out. One is, my opinion, if people are unfamiliar with Git, best place to go through and do. Yes, they show off their app, but it also teaches the fundamentals of Git at the command line, which I think is important for people to still know. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, they do have this agentic coding idea here as well. Again, it definitely shows off their tooling as part of this, but the premise works regardless of whose tooling that you are ending up leveraging. And the idea here is that we want to be able to go through and have multiple copies of our repository to let Copilot CLI or otherwise go through and act on, right? And inside of Git, the magical incantation is work tree, where it basically gives you a second copy of your repository locally that you can then turn that agent loose on. It has its own folder, its own directory. You no longer are, it's not me in Visual Studio and it going and acting on it. It now has a work tree. Work trees are pointed at branches. It can do its work. We can PR, we can merge, we can bring stuff around using source control like we've always wanted to do, but we don't have to have kind of that contention and fighting. So to make that process much easier, they gave us an agents tab. We can do new agent. We can give it a branch name of Kenny because he's sitting there, right? And I can base it on main. I can hit start session. And I am now off to the races. I have a terminal firing up in Copilot. I am in my own directory, and I can now go and start in on a task with the Copilot CLI just like I would in another one, but without having to have that extra overhead of, okay, now I have to remember how to spin a work tree. It's a couple clicks, I'm in, I'm up and running, and we see if Copilot CLI also wants to update because they only release updates, 2 or 3 times a day. They go fast. But now I can actually go through and start leveraging my agents to go through and build these things out. This is the flow that I have been leveraging as a way of getting a substantial amount of work done. It is not uncommon for me to have 5, 6, 7 work trees up and going because that's about where my human context window tops out and where I can't handle anymore because at some point, these agents are going to finish. They're going to need me to come back and tell them, yes, this is good. No, this isn't. What are we going to do? Most of the time I end with something like an aspire run command and just kick it off and say, okay, now we're going to run this and go look at what you did. Being over here, it means I also have my diffs, my source control. I can revert and say, no, 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 you are not going to commit that. That is a horrible idea. For example, earlier it tried to solve a billing problem in one of the worst possible ways I've ever seen. But with that said, it's still one of those, I can quickly go through, I can experiment, I can iterate, and I can get that code where I need it to be. And if I need to bounce out into an editor, a terminal, otherwise, lets us go. So this has been by far the best thing for me. So if people are not familiar with spinning Git work trees and this level of agent orchestration, I highly encourage you to look at it. This is a way that I think we are seeing a lot of people start to converge on how things are done. JetBrains has their Air product, which is very similar to this. Ben's going to show the VS Code Agents app. Again, similar type of idea where there is a level of agent orchestration under the hood. Oftentimes you're seeing your agent CLIs, still the ones doing the actual agentic powerhouse work. So however you've configured those, like Dan said, with your instructions or otherwise, that still matters. This now lets you pull it up a level and say, okay, I don't want to do just one issue at a time. I don't want to just act on one thing at a time. Oftentimes I will start with fix PBI 33 and send it, right? Go on, autopilot mode. Send it. Now you send it, and it actually goes and does the thing. So it is worth being aware of that. Just a couple things on the CLI for people who haven't seen it before. And hopefully I'm not stepping on anybody's toes too much. Experimental on. I love this mode. There is a bunch of features built inside the experimental, one of which is the rubber duck agent, which is kind of like an adversarial agent that will provide feedback on plans. So there's a couple times where the rubber duck agent gets automatically invoked, and just being able to have something that forces the agent to justify its commands. Like we've all done this manually before. We're chatting with the agent, it does something, we're like, what the heck were you doing? It goes, oh, no, sorry, my bad, and it goes back and fixes it. Right? You can think of the rubber duck as a way of doing it. I hate the name, that's not what a duck is supposed to do, but that's a different problem. But so if people haven't actually turned on the experimental stuff, you can always hit show and see everything that's buried inside of there. But again, one of those things that I find actually makes my CLI experience a lot better. The only two other features I really want to highlight with the CLI is it doesn't behave like a normal CLI. Copy and paste actually works, right? So if you have an image on your clipboard, you can go control. So for example, proof in the pudding, right? So if I do screenshot, Control V, right? Like I can paste screenshots right into my terminal, which is awesome, right? Like half the time if I am testing and looking at a UI thing, just being able to highlight a screenshot and say, no, look at this picture. This is wrong. This needs to be moved. This thing's being cropped, that kind of situation. So oftentimes I feel like when I'm in a terminal, I don't expect that functionality because most terminal apps don't have it. It works here. Copy also works. Again, it feels weird because Control C generally exits, and it does actually exit you out of the Copilot CLI unless you are highlighting some text. So there's been a lot of work here to actually make, even though this is a CLI app, make it feel really nice. There is a very nice interaction there as far as going back and forth. So copy paste works, terminal apps work. Wonderful agents here. And then when we are all done, we can actually just bounce back over to our other side, go down to our work trees, and then we can actually just start cleaning our work trees up and bouncing out, making them go away. Because, not that I don't like you, Kenny, but we're gonna let it go through and delete out its work tree. They're cleaned up and ready to go. So for usually the same effort as what it takes somebody to spin a branch, you can spin a work tree, off to the race. I am aware of the joke that goes with it, and that was intentional. Thank you, Ken. Okay, Ben, I'll let you rock. At some point tomorrow, we're fixing our.
Cross our fingers. Mine is the lucky one that works. Nope. Oh, we got to fix that. Whatever that's going on there. Always a problem. Never start with Mac first. So, if you haven't seen this, this is on VS Code Insiders. It's kind of the next incoming app. So this is called the Agents application, as a great name is. So a VS Code Agents application. It's basically flipping the model from edit first to code to agent first on its head. So instead of you going, hey, I want to type code first and then have agents kind of modify that code, I want to work with an agent and let that kind of operate first. It's another orchestrator. So this is kind of the layout when you're dropped into the app. On your left side here, you have like, these are all different repos I have locally, and in a bunch of different sessions I have for each repo. So I can start to manage multiple sessions across multiple repos kind of from one view. There's also a lot of little subtle changes. Like I spent the longest time looking for a plan mode until I realized plan mode's just built into agent mode. So they've abstracted a lot of those things away where now you just say, help me do this thing. And under the hood, the agent's going to go, okay, I'm going to plan, I'm going to act, kind of in the sequential steps. So for example, on this one that's still working in progress, it looks like, it went and actually, oh, there it is. It actually went and created a plan. It just did that. I didn't have to like switch into plan mode or anything like that. It's just kind of built in. Additionally, there's a lot of just little functionality that I found that happens. Thank you. Yes, that worked. Great. Additionally, there's a bunch of other little just quality of life things you can do, such as once you're in a chat, so I said, hey, go do a security review, I can actually create like sub-sessions within my main session that takes the context window and everything from that main session. I can now spin off, do some tasks, and then once I feel done, I can exit out, go back to the main thing. I'm brand new and familiar to this app. Like I found this in the past week, so I'm not an expert at this point. I'm discovering as we go, but everything is new. So another thing I found as well was on one of these, I failed a check. That one. There's a lovely little button here that says fix CI checks. So actually on the bottom right, I have a PR pushed. It's exposing all my CI checks up to me. from the same interface where I was chatting and doing things in, and I could just go hit that button, and AI is going to go figure out the log, read the logs, figure out what's going on in my CI checks, resolve those, and I don't ever actually have to think about it. So, ton of customizations. All that to say, this is just a way of, if you want to approach your code now from more of an orchestration level, I want to be able to manage agents across different repos, kind of from this more multitasking perspective, which I like for a lot of the kind of side projects I may be working on. This has been fun to start to play around with. Next thing is, which in VS Code, I spent the past week trying to figure out how, I have lots of theories about how AI works when it comes to like skills and instructions and tools. I think I know how this works. I think my mental model works, but how do I prove that? And in the past week, I discovered two things in VS Code. There's two settings. One is called Show Chat Debug View, which pulls up this side panel on the left here, where I can actually go see basically what's happening on the inside of the AI chat. So in this last chat I had, I've exposed out all the tools I have. All 364 tools are selected on my MCP server just for abusing the system. And so I can say, hey, how's things going? And what happened under the hood is it went and spent a bunch of sub-sessions against, in this case, a GPT-4o mini model. Go take all those tools I've selected and summarize them down into the actual tool set it's going to give the model that's actually going to do the work. And kind of prove the concept of, hey, you select too many tools, we're going to burn A, extra tokens, and B, we're going to do all this summarization and collapsing to try to expose out only the necessary tools, the actual AI model I'm going to use. Those were the kinds of questions I was asking myself. How do I prove these things? So one, a feature that came out, I think literally this week, is there's this thing called the agent debug logs. What's really sweet about this is if I spin up a new thing, I say, tell me about GitHub, I can actually open up my session details. I can see the number of tool calls happening, the events happening, and I can actually watch a flow chart of how the agent's actually working. It's managing the to-do list, it's actually going and doing the calls against the actual model, which it'll update live as we go. So here, when it shows GPT 5.4, because I'm in auto mode, I'm pretty sure. Yep. And it could show me the system prompts, the input tools, the input messages, the tools that it actually was exposed to it, and show me in that flow. So as I kept chatting, I could see, oh, this is the cases where maybe additional tools are actually exposed out to my model, or things aren't updated, how the actual flow happens. So hi again. And we can just see, hey, in this case, we're still within one context, a new message just gets appended, what gets actually passed back up to the model. So this is kind of just a discovery outlet. If you're like, hey, how does this actually work under the hood? I found this was really valuable. One of the cool things that led to some of my discoveries was in these logs, I could actually go see the weight of tools. So in this case, I guess I have 103 tools selected. I don't know really what's going on right now. I could see how large the footprint of an MCP tool is in my context window. Like there's a significant amount of context being taken up by my MCP tools by default, and made me go, oh, this isn't just this like theoretical thing. There's a lot of context taken in by my MCP servers. We're still going. And because of that, it made me go, okay, before I start my new thing, I'm gonna actually take the 10 seconds to just select the tools that I actually need for this use case and not just go use a million tools. There's some general guidelines that kind of have come out of this. AI is about to become a whole lot more expensive if you're on the GitHub Copilot side of things. So I'm trying to be a lot more cautious. My default flow in the past 2 months has been pull up like a Sonnet 4.6 and be like, go use all the Opus and GPT subagents you want and just burn all the tokens you want. I don't care. Have fun. And now I'm starting to be a lot more cautious of this coming into the new billing cycle, where I have some like rules for myself that I think are applicable of if something can be represented as a skill, like use a skill over MCP. Skills are just behavioral guidance. It doesn't allow you the same tool efficiencies that an MCP server does, the same auth kind of things. But if it's just behavioral guidance, use it as a skill, not an MCP, because unlike an MCP server that exposes just like this for a single tool, a skill exposes this. This is all that goes into context windows. So there's a little skills block, name of the skill, the description of the skill, and the file, and that's it. And then the AI agent looks at that and goes, well, actually, in this case, I want that code review skills seems really applicable. I'm going to load it into my context. Once it loads it in context once, it won't reload. Things like that. Another thing is if you want it to load in every time, this is always a rule that I want to load in every time. Go use an extra instructions file so that instead of the AI determining this is the right time to load in my skill, this isn't the right time to load in my skill, the instructions files just load up automatically into your AI agent's context. There are conditions depending on if you're in like GitHub or Claude code or similar things. There's different like conditionals where you can say, actually only load up this instruction file if I'm dealing with C# files and similar. But I'm trying to minimize my instructions file to be like, these are actually the things I needed to know all the time versus I'm actually going to maybe split out into skills, things I wanted to know only if it thinks it needs time. And then lastly, with a skill, I've noticed this habit that people have is because Claude and GitHub store their skills in different directories, people will like store them on Claude and then tell GitHub, hey, when you need the skill, go just check out the skills directory to find all your skills. And it turns out like when that happened, I once again used these debug logs and I tracked it down and I saw when GitHub saw the instruction, go look at the skills in this directory, it no longer used this fancy metadata to load it into its context dynamically. It did an actual tool execution where it said, well, let me go load up those skills. And it just read all the skill files like straight off the bat, which kind of defeats the purpose of a skill. So from that, I learned, hey, it's actually either good to one, symlink your files across if you need to do that, or two, have like a skill in your Claude skill that says, go look at your GitHub or vice versa, so that when they dynamically load up that skill, then they take the tool call to actually load it up, but you're not taking extra hits otherwise. My super last quick thing is if you haven't seen MCP apps, little plug for them, they're pretty cool. I found out about this 2 weeks ago. They're now a way that you can have a UI inside of your chat window. So if I say I'm going to start a run, can you show me a timer for my run? I can have AI use an MCP server with a conditional resource and a event or a tool in order to actually display me same tools I could before, but through a UI even. Give it a second to think. Oh, of course, now it's not working. I'll pull up my existing chat. There we go. We'll just pretend that worked the first time. And I can actually, inside my chat window, I can now display, like in this case, a UI for my timer where I can interact with the timer. I can start, stop, anything you can imagine there. And AI can interact with that same MCP server and it can interact with the tool. So this, I think, is a really cool opportunity where now I can have like a color picker instead of AI asking me, what color do you want to pick? And I have to go look up a hex code. It can just display to me a color picker. I can select it and now information will actually go back to the AI agent for it to use. So wide variety. I know I've gone at 2,000 miles an hour, but that's all I got.
Kind of pivot from our normal format and go and do a little Q&A. So I'm going to make you go first. So there was a question online.
Oh, right, yeah.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah, I can.
So he can actually know what it is.
Well, Dan's got to come up and sit here too. Dan's got to bring something.
Yeah, I will. But the first question for Stokes is, are Quen 3.6 and DeepSeek V4 the best local models for C# or .NET code? Will models get smaller and better eventually so that we eventually be able to get to run an Opus 4.6-like model?
Yes, so I actually have been playing around with those, so I'm going to bring up my notes even though no one can see my notes, so it lets me cheat even more than I usually do. But yes, so they are, I've been using Quen 3.6, the actual code version of it. So I always go to the Olama website and look at their models. And so then there's a Quen 3.6 model. I know no one can see what I'm clicking on over here. Yeah, it is. It's great. And so they actually have Quen 3.6 models specifically for coding, so your only input, now kind of going against what Kevin said, is, oh, you can cut and paste an image. Well, if you get a specific, like some of these Quen models are text only, and the good news is Olama kind of clarifies if it's text or image as well. So I've been using a text only one, because that's the only way I interact with it. And then I've also been picking the, so like Quen 3.6 has this 27 billion parameter, but that's always the 27 billion parameter, or they have this 35 billion parameter, but only 3 billion parameters are active at a time. So it's this, they call them MOE, and now I can't remember, models of experience, that's right, that's what it was. And so it's basically each token that you get, so it's been trained on 35 billion parameters, but then each token that it gets, it's only going to use 3 billion of those parameters at a time. So it's kind of, it makes it a lot more memory, memory laxing. Like, I guess it's easier on memory, that's what I'm trying to say. So yeah, so ironically enough, the 27 billion model uses more RAM than the 35 billion model, because technically the 35 billion model is only using 3 billion at a time. So yeah, the Quen 3.6 is great for the coding. The other one that was recommended was this DevStrawl Small 2, which I guess is actually a really good model as well, except for the fact that I found out when I was trying to run it, I guess it's not considered a thinking model. So as I was configuring OLAM, I'm going to sit there and say, oh, use the response API instead of the chat API, and then I tried to fire up the DevStrawl model that sat there and said, oh, we can't use the response API because we're not a thinking model, and you have to set up OLAM to be a chat API instead of a thinking API. So there are differences, but yeah, but the Quen 3.6 has actually been pretty good. I have not tried the other one that they mentioned, but I would definitely give Quen 3.6 a chance if you're going to use that. It does now. The other part too is, and this is where I kind of got confused at times, was as you get in, like, so Quen 3.6 and even some other models, they have different variations from the coding model, right? So you'll get, I'm just looking at my screen here, you've got this MXFP8 and this NVFP4 and this BF16, and they're all the Quen 3.6, 35 billion, 3 billion active coding models, right? And you go, what's the difference? Well, then when you start looking at the sizes, you go, oh, the BF16 takes 70 gig, but the MXFP8 is only 38 gig. You're like, what's the difference? Well, I guess they compress these models down. And so then even the FP4 is only a 22 gig. So it's trying to take these 36 billion parameters and then even condense it down more by the quadrant. I guess they do some quadrant compression stuff. I will say the FP4 didn't behave nearly as well as the FP8, but it's also a 22 gig model versus a 38 gig model. And the tricky part I'm finding is I'm so used to things where it's like, oh, okay, that's 38 gigs, right? I'm thinking, oh, that's what it's going to pull down to my hard drive. It's like a virtual machine, right? I've got this giant virtual machine, but I'm only using, the whole virtual machine doesn't have to load into memory. The tricky part when you're dealing with Olama models is when it says it's 38 gig, that is how much it's going to put into memory. So your memory gets slammed when you do these. And I tried to actually do the BF16, which was 70 gig, and I went to fire it up, and Olama was like, no, you have 64 gigs of RAM at best on this machine. You can't even use this model. There's other times where I've seen some demos where people have they try to load up like a 28 gig model on a 32 gig VRAM card, but then you also now have this context window concept. So even though the model's taking up that much, you have to also sit there and take into consideration, well, what's my context window going to add on top of that? And so kind of always do a plus, for lack of, for as weird as it sounds, almost sit there and say it's like, at least assume you're going to take up another tenth of what that model is. So if it's a 38 gig model, if you expand out your context window to the most, which on these it's 256K, assume you're going to put about another 4 gig into your memory. Like I was running this, even though the model said 38 gigs, I think I peaked at about 52 gigs at one point in time when I was just looking at the process that Olama was running. So they do take up more than what they just had. And if you go beyond and you start swapping out of GPU or NVRAM, or VRAM into standard RAM, your computer just lags. So we don't have to worry about that with Macs because we're unified memory, go Mac for that. But PCs, I've seen demos where, yeah, the whole PC just starts crashing slow, like just degrading slowly.
All I can say is I hope we don't go this way fully, because this sounds too complicated for me. But I want
questions you have, but also what are you currently doing, right? Like, I think development is such a, I still come from a little bit of the development as an art, and everyone kind of has their own unique way to do it. So I'm always interested in hearing other people and how they do it. That was one of the reasons I was really excited for this is just seeing what people are even experimenting with, because there's so many fun things. So do people have things they want to share, or whether that's tips or, I have this question or whatever, I want to hear from what you guys are doing with your workflows.
This is Dan's way of trying to make you guys all presenters here.
Yeah.
At some point in time.
Then you can plug in and also not work on
Exactly.
TV. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Yes, so like what Kevin was showing, like, I had AI kind of roll that same sort of things, like, hey, I want to work on multiple things at a time. I haven't actually had a chance to see if any of it works, but it did the work trees, and so how do you deal with like all of the other stuff? And the answer might just be Aspire, which I'm also trying to get rolled into our applications. But all of the dependencies, and okay, so now I've got 4 instances of this running, and I go hit .NET Run on this one. How do I make sure if I go hit .NET Run on the other one, the same repo, and and that they're not fighting for resources and ports and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, so the fighting for resources, it does come down to the same idea of if you imagine you doing it by hand, right? If you had these work trees spun up. So on a lot of our repositories we've gone through, because it's very easy to accidentally run into, like you said, port contention or otherwise, or we're spinning up Docker containers. And if you've gone through and said, oh, by the way, every time my SQL server is going to be on a container named food. Well, guess what happens when I try to spin the second one? That doesn't play nice anymore. And so making sure that we've actually done at least some level of engineering work to be able to spin those things separately. All of these orchestrators usually have some concept of like initialization scripts or otherwise that can get kicked off. And so oftentimes leveraging that for like even environment variables. Right? Because a lot of these, when you spin it, you'll set environment variables, giving like your work tree name. Great, perfect. Now I've got a unique ID I can suffix things with as a way of being able to go through and do it. Because it isn't that you can just do this willy-nilly without doing some level of engineering work. Because they will absolutely stomp on each other for a while. And even things like the Aspire MCP, if it's not able to differentiate between the two, it's trying to run and then figure out which app host to communicate with. Well, if you haven't done anything to separate them, you run into the problem of now agent 1 talks to the Aspire MCP, and maybe it then interacts with the wrong app host. And then the agent that was running the other one's going, what the heck just happened? Like, why are things stopping? Where are these things coming from? So you can definitely get yourself wrapped around the axle a little bit. NPM is another one that we have done a little bit of work on, because an NPM install on some of our projects took me like 5 minutes, and that was unacceptable because I wasn't going to do that every time I spun a separate work tree. And so I went through and dealt with taking our package lock, getting a hash, and just being able to do a file copy. Copilot had a clever solution with symlinks, but it scared me because the moment you have one update, it then breaks the other ones in weird ways. I'm like, you know what? The file copy got it down to I think like 25 seconds. I'm like, that's acceptable, right? I'm willing to make those kinds of trade-offs for speed of getting up and running versus going through and doing it. So you do have to actually deal with those problems, and that is sometimes the more interesting one of dealing with it. And again, like you said, Aspire is one solution, but depending on your framework and language of choice, there's often ways to deal with it. They just often require us to do the engineering work for it rather than it, coming out of the box for free.
And I think 2 things. One being, as orchestrators become the norm, I think more frameworks are going to be built around that idea of whether that's they come up with interesting solutions with VMs or the sort, right? You spin up the whole Docker containers or Docker environments of, this is now my app running. I think that's the first thing is orchestrators are the way a lot of these companies are going. They're going to come up with great solutions. But second, I think Kevin had mentioned earlier is the human context window is a big factor there. How many different applications can I go through and validate? How many different applications can I individually manage? And that kind of is the end, right? Like no matter how many agents I kick off, it only really matters when I come back to them. So on a single machine, maybe that's 4, maybe that's 5. I don't think I can do 5. I think I top out at like 3 different contexts that jump around. I'm focusing on this problem over here, and this one's really front-end focused, this one's really back-end focused, and then there's one kind of in the middle, but I can't really do more than 3. And if it starts to go that way, then that's where we start delegating to the cloud, right? Whether that's GitHub, hey, you're now fully just a PR that you're iterating on, but locally I can't do more than 3. So I think that's a big.
I can do 12 if I'm YOLOing it and not doing it. Very
Well, I'm not Kevin.
It's
so let's
very
be clear.
easy if you just straight YOLO, which I think there is a question to be had though of like, what are you working on, right? Like, I've got a small app that I have built for managing board games with my gaming group, right? The blast radius is 5 total people, and I only care about the opinion of one of them. So, I am very happy.
Is that one you?
Correct. I am very happy to YOLO a lot of stuff in because I'll just check it when it's running. It's not a big, like, there's no sensitive data. Like, worst case scenario, I torch one of my databases and throw away some record stuff. Whatever, right? So there is a question to be had on how much effort some things warrant. Things that like are actually being used by real people to do real work, I don't think you blindly YOLO them, right? Like, there has to be some level of checks in place. DevOps is a thing. It's now more important than ever. And the people going fastest are the ones that have the best DevOps processes.
And the burden is a lot more on the developers for that DevOps. Like, understanding the practices, understanding where different guardrails should be, is becoming more and more early in the process, right? It's not, I set up my app and when I get to deployments, I get to deployments. It's now, oh crap, I need to deploy this thing. What do I do, right? Great question.
Are there any tools that help you manage like that? You've got a bunch of contexts going, and just kind of like, okay, I'm working on this one, and I'm doing some human verification, and things are just kind of, finishing up in that because I thought, okay, I finished this one, let me move on to this next one. They're just kind of like, okay, here's the next thing to work on, you can go, okay, here's your next instruction, do that. Any tools that you run into that just help you manage that? I know the Copilot CLI will now kind of raise its hand and say, hey, I'm waiting for you, but they're just all different terminal windows going.
Yeah. So the 2 that he showed, and go ahead.
I've been having a look at this thing, one of the guys on the .NET team built called Squad. It's kind of weird because it goes into, it's about human management of that thing, but it also really dives deeply into sort of personification, which I find a bit icky. I really don't need my virtual agents to be, called Bob and Sue and stuff. It's very much about that. But essentially you build a bunch of personas who work on your project, and so you'll have a persona who is the overall general contractor, and then a persona who does C# coding, a persona that does Python coding. I've got a GitHub project here, and if you want to have a look, can have a look. I don't know, I'm sort of wrapping my head around it, so I've only been looking at it for a few days. Essentially, you create a charter.md file for each personality, and so here there's one called Scribe. There's a silent record keeper that just basically sits around in the project making a log of everything everybody else has done. That's probably not the most interesting one to pick to see what the award we should play from our names. So Deckard he's the project lead who's making the architectural decisions, reviewing the other PRs from all the other ones, so first stage reviewing, and then managing priorities and feeding the tasks into the other agents. I think that's the only way we're going to manage it. I mean, I've been, my role on the team is an architect, and I've got about 10-ish engineers who are working sort of in the area that I'm fairly directly working in. And I used to just about be able to code with that level of context between what 10 people were doing. I mean, I wasn't coding that well, even then, to be perfectly honest. And now they're all doing 5 things at a time. And it's suddenly 50. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So I needed, something to disintermediate that between what I've got to really review. So, what I'm starting to to noodle on is a persona that sits in the project team, essentially say called the escalator. Well, I guess I'm going to have to think of a cuter name than that, given everything in Squad has sort of personified name. I guess it doesn't really have to, but that basically does its best to make intelligent decisions about what I should pay attention to. And then just gets on with everything else. Because you just get to a point where if you want to, get the maximum out of it, you cannot look at everything. And that's where you get into obviously, using one model, cross-review another, and trying to take, risk-oriented decisions around where you need humans in the loop and where you can move away from it.
And I think a couple other things of so Stokes and I both played around Squad a little bit. Yeah, it's a little weird seeing the personification and they start referring to each other as those names. It's a little weird, and the arguments that they have between each other are funny, but I think the couple, and maybe I'll let you talk about Squad for a second, but I think one thing is not only from the CLI level, but there are some tools about managing priorities. I was originally going to talk about Copilot CLI and some of the cool commands that you can do, like stand up or help or those kind of things, and help you better manage. The TV thing happened, but yeah, there are tools built into Copilot CLI to expose those kind of priorities, or what have you been working on this past day, right? / Chronicle stand up is give me the past week of things, and then sort by priority. And a lot of it's just delegating to different agents to search through your records of your chat history. But yeah, it's becoming a really difficult overhead of not only am I keeping all this context of what my agents are trying to do, but now the agents have to talk to each other to understand what's going on. It's a really crazy thing. But yeah, if you want to talk about Squad a little bit, please.
No, the only thing I was going to say about Squad was, yeah, unfortunately, I hadn't goofed around with it. And yes, the scribe agent is interesting, but the scribe agent, probably my most frustrating part about that was I was actually trying to, okay, yeah, scribe's great with regards to keeping a log, but it was keeping track of kind of what was going on, but I wanted to know, I was trying to learn at the same time, okay, how is this really working? So I insisted on this thing saying, never consider a task to be complete until the scribe has written out my initial prompt, and then a summary of what happened, right? Because I wanted to kind of get an idea. I was trying to train myself, not just train AI. I was trying to train myself. How can I speak to AI to be the most efficient to get my output? So it's okay, I want to keep a log of, here's what I asked, here's what you did, to know, was I even close, was the outcome even close to what I typed? And it was one of those where, again, yeah, I love how AI, and this is actually going to ask Kevin a question too on how. I like what he's got going on there with Git cracking, because my issue was, where I'm going with this whole thing is, again, it's kind of like talking to a 5-year-old. Sometimes they say, yes, I'll do that, and other times oh, I forgot you asked me to do that. So even though I sat there and told it, this is your directive, you will always write this down for me, I'd sit there and have to every about 5th time go, Scribe didn't write, oh, you're right, I forgot to ask Scribe to do that, so let me go back into our context and have it do this. So it's just funny to see, no matter how much you try to tell it, because again, going back to the other thing too, I tried to tell AI, always work on a branch, never do any work on main, I don't care what happens, you must always, and I mean, I'm putting asterisks around it and everything else to try to make it as markdowny bold, like I'm yelling at you, all caps. And all of a sudden it gets done. It's I just finished this task. I'm you're still in main. Oh, you're right. I just ignored that directive. It's I'll set that as directive 0. And then the next time I go in there, it's okay, you did it again. He goes, oh, you're right. I saw directive 0 and decided not to listen to it. It's oh, great. Okay, fantastic. So, yeah, I wasn't always able to get branches out, but no, the scribe and squad are great, but it is a matter of, yeah, trying to keep track of what all is going on. So Seth, I know this is a very roundabout way. I actually just watch my windows pop up, but I'm also that guy, I'm the oldest one up here, so I might spawn off 15 agents at a time, but that's only because I forgot I spawned off 14 of them. So my context window is 1 agent at a time, so yeah. So I usually only have 1 window popping up. I'm really bad about trying to get anything beyond that to delegate out, unless I am using something like Squad. But again, like we talked earlier, the number of tokens that Squad is now consuming, I don't know if that's going to be.
So I think I would also answer too, Seth, as far as I think the tooling catching up is what we're going to start seeing happen a lot more next, is as we see people putting out these orchestrators, right? That's kind of the the next evolution forward. There was a GitHub PM I was talking to earlier this week, and he had made a comment about how it would be great if we could just automatically jump forward to kind of a future state, but that's not, people don't make those big leaps. People kind of want the incremental change, and with the AI stuff, it's been incremental change, it's just that they've been bang, 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 rapid fire
Every
coming
single
at you.
day, so you're like, oh, I checked back 2 weeks, oh, we do this now.
Yeah, you waited, it's been 3 weeks, where have you been, right? So there's a little bit of that situation, I think, coming where we're going to see that those incremental changes, somewhat so that people can build that confidence and run forward a little bit. Of, we need better tools, somewhat so that we can help manage this, and somewhat so that people can build up muscle memory skill in doing this, because I don't think that everybody's at the same spot as far as being able to just leap and go. So I think
the
that
Minesweeper and the Solitaire of AI.
yeah,
Because both of those existed to teach people the gestures of using a mouse.
yeah, and I like even that orchestrator stuff that I showed with the CLI, right? I would say I would anticipate changes occurring where it maybe isn't just orchestrating the CLI, right? Copilot has an SDK out there to where you can build any Copilot on top of kind of a shared framework and that kind of stuff. And so expecting that there will be more iterations on there. And right now we're seeing the Copilots inside of VS Code and the CLI because that's where developers are now, right? But as people move forward with some newer tools, I would expect to kind of see an iteration of that continue forward. So I don't know if that really helps your thing. At least for me, like I said, I love the work tree approach. I love the spinning sessions on individual work trees like that. On nights where I'm just iterating on a single project by myself, I'll put through a dozen PRs and it's not without batting an eye, because I can queue them up, I can have them running, and then like you said, as they finish, depending on what it is, I'm doing some level of verification, looking at the code, saying make this change. It almost becomes more of a code review session, and the limiting factor is, can I remember what I prompted it to do at the beginning, so that when I open it, I go, what was this?
That's why I want
Yeah,
to know.
I keep them on the different monitors so they're all in the same place, so I go back, this is this one.
Well, and you'll start to see even in like VS Code, and I believe this is being surfaced from the Copilot SDK, right? Is it starts to put names on your sessions, right?
Yeah,
And which I find to be
I've renamed my
incredibly
sessions even in Copilot CLI. It's
The
like,
CLI can also sometimes auto do it.
yeah, it'll auto do it based on your first prompt, where you're
Yeah.
like, that's not really what I'm doing.
Yeah, and so having that, and I think the other thing I would tell you too is I don't often reuse my same work trees.
Yeah.
Right? I usually, if I'm going to spin a work tree, it's going to be for a section of work, and I'm either going to the point where I abandon it and nuke it, or I'm going to the whole PR completion and bring it through. It's kind of rare that I would run it and then like clear my context window. Like I'm usually, it's some bit of work that I want done, and we're going to stay working on this until we either decide, nah, that experiment isn't what I wanted, let's get rid of it, or okay, PR, merge, and go. Because up to and including have Copilot dealing with merge conflicts. I don't know how many people deal with the team saying, oh yeah, I'll get that in, I just got to deal with some merge conflicts. Well, guess what? Hey, Copilot, rebase on latest main, go, right? Like, and it will usually do a halfway decent job of handling it, and especially if you've got tests and everything else, putting those guardrails up to make sure that you aren't regressing. Like those automated things become even more valuable with AI, because they end up being your guardrails.
And I think two things off of that. The first being that process only really works when you know and are controlling those kind of things, right? Like Kevin is really fast at iterating because he's already a good developer, right? He can do those kind of things. He says that, but that's just not true. But like the human context window is kind of just more into play and more into play, right? Understanding where your limitations are and being able to control the AI is really important. I think that's just, I don't know, part of learning engineering, and it's that curve is just becoming really hard. So I don't you know, what the next 6 months is still up in the air, but just had that thought. But there was a question online that I wanted to get in before we moved on. It was wondering if anyone has done triggering different agents and if that helps. Planner / test agent / developer, code review agent and any successes that help extend the context window for you. For my answer, I think the biggest one is the planning, forcing myself to get into the habit of planning and having more just upfront thought or setting the patterns myself has been a big part of that. So I don't really use other different types of agents. I don't have a lot of custom modes because I find the agent mode in Copilot CLI just is going to do the general things, and if I need to give it specific context, I do. But I do generally go from plan to autopilot or pilot. So I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on the different triggers or using a planner or a test agent and developers, but kind of more of the squad idea.
I was just about to say, that was kind of the reason I looked into Squad, which I talked about earlier, right? Was I didn't know which agent to pick, and I got overwhelmed when I started looking at Awesome Copilot. And yeah, I mean, I guess for me now, the part I'm trying to, I would love to go back and kind of do a retro on, like a retrospective on just how things would have been different. So I will admit, I got Learning Squad and went, oh, this is awesome. It spins up, like I said, the back end, front end, and this guy says, oh, I'm gonna make the APIs, and I'm gonna do all the web stuff, so I know how to make things look pretty. It'd be curious to know, okay, well, would I have gotten the same code quality if I just would have sat there and asked the agent? So I never really went back and tried to do a side-by-side to say, what's my output with regards to Squad, and what's my output with regards to just agent mode? I will say, I know I've used agents a couple of times, just specifically, I'm not a SQL guy, so I did sit there and say, I love that Copilot, I can hook it up into my SQL Server database and basically say, hey, these stored procedures are running really slow, please go fix them. And like I said, that was the conversation I kind of had with Seth. And it went through and said, hey, here you go. And yeah, I mean, it did a great job on some, but again, it was one of those where I know we keep talking about, okay, how much of the human in the loop do we do? Like, when can you finally trust it and when can't you? And I hate to say it, the more I use it, the more I say I can't trust it, because I do sit there and I asked the exact same question. I mean, it was a copy paste of the prompt like 3 times or 4 times on optimize these stored procedures, and I got 2 or 3 different answers out of the 4 times, like 3 different answers out of the 4 times I ran it. And I sat there and like, and one of them was just a reiteration of the first, of like the slow one. Like the timing wasn't better or anything. It's like, hey, this will improve performance. I'm like, well, you didn't slow it down, but you didn't make it any better, right? So I have a hard time sitting there saying, I'm not to the level yet where I can sit there and say, oh, I don't need to try this before I say, yes, this is good. So yeah, I know that doesn't necessarily answer the agent question per se, but that's where I'm at too from a mental standpoint is, yeah, I have tried to use specific agents, but I haven't, I will admit I have tried to sit there and say, okay, like when I was looking at the Kiro stuff, how does that write an app versus how does Copilot write an app? And so I was trying to do side-by-side prompting there. Well, come to find out, I think they were using the same models under the covers anyway. So I was getting very similar apps anyway. But yeah, with regards to having luck with trying to specifically throw out models, I can't say, or agents, sorry, not models, but agents, I can't say it's really picking the right model more than picking the right agent seems to be the big trick for me. So.
Will say though too, that rubber duck agent in the Copilot CLI, that kind of model where there is, the best I can describe is kind of that adversarial model where it goes back and challenges it, does seem to produce much better results for me. Like that, and I think specifically too, if you're gonna go through and leverage kind of one agent off of another, one thing that has gotten a lot of good luck is making sure that you aren't picking models from the same family, right? So you end up pitting like a Claude and a GPT against each other rather than a Claude and or an Opus and a Sonnet, because you end up things kind of in that same grouping. Because if you have like Opus 4.6 critique Opus 4.7, they tend to be similar enough.
In the same pitfalls,
they don't cover each other's blind spots nearly as well. And so having in that regard, because the question there around like the planner, test, developer type flow, having those types of situations set up, I think does end up producing better results. And I think too, once again, guardrails up for what you want the agent to do, right? It'll take as much freedom as you give it. And so if you don't want it doing something, like oftentimes when I've prompted it, if it produces a result I didn't like, usually my first question is, what could I have done differently to prevent that result from happening, right? Sometimes maybe that's some sort of static analyzer. Sometimes that's an editor config. Sometimes that's maybe different prompting in an instructions or a skill or otherwise. But that's usually my first question when I get output that I don't like for whatever reason, right? Is there something I need to change so that I get better output in the future? Because as I get better and better output, kind of like Stokes said, if you start off kind of vanilla, you oftentimes do get things that are just blatantly wrong, right? But as you get that refined, it gets better and better. And you start build. It's kind of like code that you've run for a long time that's well tested. You build up a level of trust where if somebody says there's a bug in it, you go, no, it's not. Right? Like this has been out in prod for 10 years. Like what wacky thing have you done to break this? It's been stable for so long. You start to build a similar trust almost of I've built these patterns up around my repository. I trust my tests. I trust my deployment. You're saying something's wrong, okay, but I've got all of this extra verification in place. So it's a trust but verify.
I'm almost not even looking at any output from AI until I say go do something and I queue up a message so that when it kicks back to me, it automatically sends a message that just says, like if I'm using Sonnet 4.6, I'll say like, go iterate back and forth with like an Opus 4.6 and a GPT 5.5 till you all agree, and they'll just sit there like, get results from back from both, cross them, send them back, and like until you guys all agree, I'm like, I don't even need to lay eyes on this because it turns out they'll sort themselves out. At least some of the minor things that I wouldn't have cared to keep prompting them on. The other thing is like Git hooks, the same way that you can say, hey, before you can even like git commit or git push, you have to adhere to these kind of static analysis or these commands. The same things exist with the AI agents where there are now hooks built into the lifecycle. And so like one of the most common ones I use is a pre-edit hook where I'll say like, let's say we're dealing with the front end NPM thing. I'm like, before you write any code, it better adhere to my ESLint rules. Otherwise, like, why are you doing this? And so before it can go use the edit tool, it has to adhere by the ESLint rules. Otherwise, it'll get kicked back and say, no, you can't touch this tool yet. Go try again. And it'll just sit there trying again and again until it like adheres to something that's actually statically holding it to its range. So there's like all these hook points, like start your session, before you use a tool, before you spin out subagents, et cetera, that you can kind of hook into and start to influence the lifecycle, like send messages back or stop it from doing certain things that you can build in. There's obviously
fancy.
Exactly. Just with your battle between GPT-5 and Opus,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh,
So
that's
it'll change it as it goes.
I still have 20 days of this. But.
/ask, you can still just have infinite sessions with one preview request if you use /ask, but
the hooks are great to help kind of, once again, create those guardrails. Like now I have something that's injecting into the agent lifecycle that is a static analysis regularly going on. Obviously, I don't want it to be like a super long running thing. Hey, go run all my end-to-end tests every time you like touch a file, but I can start to inject intelligent static level analysis things to help keep it along, better guardrails as they're going along.
And I know we've made comments about like the pricing change and whatnot, but I think there's a value add question to be answered as well. Yes, the pricing's changing, but the pricing in Copilot's changing is not vastly different than a lot of the alternatives.
Right.
Like it's fairly in line with what you would expect if you went to one like a Claude or otherwise. But like I think for me the big thing that will change is potentially a little bit of the behavior, right? Like maybe I stop trolling my PM quite as much with implementing IP over AV carriers with Copilot, right? Like those types of things. Maybe I stop wasting tokens doing that.
less fun tokens.
Right. But like I think it is a big question of the value add of what are we actually going to use these things for, which I think is probably perfectly fine. It's not overly different.
So what do you all think is the big change or a couple of big changes you're going to make to your personal process next month?
For me, the biggest one is going to be personal projects. The amount of time that I've just done, like, I have this idea, I'm going to do a prototype off to the side while I'm doing work at the same time. That's where, like, I've expanded past, like, 3 context windows. Like, I don't really care what this looks like at all, but I can just let it sit. I'll just let it go. So that's the big one, is that's, like, I was telling Stokes earlier, that's probably like 40% of my preview requests a month. There's just, like, a random side project that I have a crumb of an idea. I say, hey, go flesh out this idea. Okay, great. Now I actually go to implement that's the first one. And then second is gonna be, I just think the biggest is more upfront, just, I don't know, like rigor or less being like, I don't really know what I want, but go do this, oh, this didn't work, do this, do this. So I think less iteration in AI, and maybe that's, I don't know, maybe there's different ways to do that, but I think that's the two biggest ones, is side projects and iteration.
I think a big one for me is gonna be like, right now, because yes, back in the day, and it was funny because I was working with a buddy of mine about 6 months ago, and we sat there, and he was doing something with AI, I was doing something with AI, and like both of us got to a spot where our code didn't work. And he sat there and he just like copy and pasted the error, threw that in there, and I sat there and I'm like, no, this is an easy code change. I'm just going to go in and make the code change. So I think a lot of it's going to be, how much do I just blindly throw back at AI? Okay, my code doesn't compile, fix it, right? Versus, oh, well, I can go in and put the semicolon instead of burning tokens on the compilation type of thing. So I think I'm going to be a little bit more picky about what I ask AI to do. Like right now, like I said, there's really no cost to me. So it's like, yep, Chrome DevTools, even like I was back there just working with the Alumni stuff. DevTools gave me this error. Well, I knew what the issue was, but I wanted to know, hey, can AI fix it for me, right? So I probably won't play around with it as much if the answer is obvious to me. I also think my model is going to change. I probably will be using OLAM a little bit more and not be worried. Yes, I mean, at least from a starter, especially too, because Olama can get you, I mean, like I said, there's about 6 months behind what the models can do today, but Olama can at least get you going, right? So I could see myself, kind of like how Dan's saying, I might not use it as much for pet projects and things like that. I could see myself using that for pet projects and just letting it run overnight. Because yes, it's going to take a lot longer to run, but I can just say, leave my laptop on overnight and say, go for it, right? And see what I get in the morning. So I see myself probably using multiple, like not just relying on the Microsoft Copilot cloud services and trying to augment that with some other things. And like I said too, just if I know the answer, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to be like, oh, let's see if AI can fix it for me. It's copy paste. So yeah.
I think for me, the big thing is just cutting down the number of iterations with AI that I throw away. Right, so like right now I've been going through a bunch of my projects trying to make sure that I've got my appropriate instructions through related skills, pulling in the plugins that we've written, because I don't mind the AI usage when I get good output. It sucks if I do it and then it feels like throwaway, like, yeah, that didn't work and we're trashing. So for me, the big change is trying to get my projects to the point where when I'm prompting it to do something, even if it chews some tokens, if I get good output, that's good value, right? So I'm looking to try to get to that stage where somebody loves tokens.
Yeah, I was gonna say he doesn't agree with you.
but getting to the point where I'm getting reasonable output that I'm not throwing away, right? That's what I'm really looking for. Is if it's good output and good value, no problem. Right? If it's something where I prompt it and I go, yeah, I'm abandoning this, that's now a waste of my time. Right? Waste of my time, waste of tokens, waste of dollars. So fixing my repositories.
Configuration up front, and like one of my primary cycles right now that I found really successful is like I'm gonna spin off 2 subagents, like rubber duck this thing over and over again, and I'm somewhat hands off at that point. It's just going. I might come back and burn a million tokens. I might burn 10 million tokens. I'm kind of like just iterate long enough. Like I'm trusting your guys' judgment until you come back with what you guys all think is acceptable. And that might be just more, hey, I need to now like spend time eyes on the code and actually dealing with stuff and evaluating stuff and then giving a prompts back.
Maybe we can use some cheaper models for the others.
Yes.
Potentially.
Like we had one engineer that I think spent the entire last month running Opus 4.6 and 4.7 for everything, regardless of what the task is. And I think there will probably be some more thought put into picking a better model, right? Like, do you need that level of model for a simple refactor? No. And in fact, usually I don't want the model thinking too much. If it's hey, I just need you to make this transformation. Just don't think, do, right? And so sometimes the dumber models are more efficient for getting the task done.
I don't know if it's best, but I've started bookending all my sessions where I'm like, I plan maybe with a bigger model and we're really trying to flush out the implementation details. For the plan itself, it's usually detailed syntax and get the thing done. And then when I'm doing that kind of review cycle, and then bringing in two other things to be like, hey, let's be really critical about this and do research if we need to about the changes that have been made since you guys have been trained to just kind of check that. So I've been kind of doing that, but once again, there is expense to even that second half potentially that I just have to be cautious of. Unfortunately, I really like that cycle. I really like that cycle, but
I feel like we might get into a state like early game development. So the fact that a Super Nintendo cartridge maxed out at 256K and they fit the entire game and all the assets in there, and that's because everything was highly optimized. And then hardware started becoming commodity, and now games are just bloated and nobody cares. But we might get to that thing where, okay, I'm going to make sure my prompts are crafted to be efficient, to use, only the tokens they need and that kind of stuff. Now we'll have to learn what those are, but I think we'll start getting that where we're, 4 cents, I'm going to let you run overnight. Like, I literally had some stuff. I'm like, okay, I did this stuff, and it cost me 12 cents. And I'm like, okay. And then I said, give me the metrics for the tokens that I used, for what would be the new list. So it was like, it's going from 12 cents to $250. And that's only for 2 hours, like 2 hours of go churn on this stuff.
it changes the math for how you just evaluate things.
Yeah.
For sure. So
I'm also curious though to see, I think there's probably gonna be, as these pricing models are changing, I think you're gonna get a different view of models too, right? I mean, really for the most part, we're up here, we're saying, I mean, we're developers. I probably don't need an Opus 4.7 that knows about finance and world economics and religion and all this other stuff to write a C# Vue.js application, right? So I'm curious to see, and I think in my gut, which I hope is right, is that we're going to start getting kind of models that are specific to a programming model. This is trained on really good algorithms and things like that. I don't care about religion. I don't need like a worldly model type of thing. So yes, these large language models are great, but I think they're now getting too big for what we really utilize it for. I mean, this is what we've kind of been talking about, right? Is how do I write a good agent file that scopes down Opus so that it does what I want it to do? And it's like, okay, why can't we just get the model to be scoped down to do what we want it to do as well? So I think it's going to be interesting to see. I'm hoping that the future doesn't keep building on these large language models. I'm hoping these people that kind of do the Olama and kind of some of those other local models sit there and say, no, let's now rein in some things and get specialty models almost instead of writing specialty agents across these giant models. So I'm curious to see if that's going to happen.
There was a question online, but he commented that it seemed like you answered it. You imagine that there's a benefit to using free or local models to help with prompt management, organization, thoughts on that type of stuff before throwing your Copilot subscription or Claude. I do think that there will be probably some amount of tooling catch-up that's all around efficiency and delegation.
Yeah.
Like I can see, like there's already a little bit of that where,
Copilot CLI already has some smarts about how it delegates the models, but I think it's going to be a lot about and like Stokes said, hopefully the models go that direction as well as it's not times 27 to just call the big model. It's like, well, I really have this intense C# backend. No, I'm going to the specific backend architect model or whatever it is, not just an agent. But, yeah. Is any final thoughts? We're kind of getting past the time. We can go as long as everyone wants, but I don't want to take too much time. But I really appreciate the discussion. And I think, as it continues to go, so many things are going to change. But also, at the end of the day, it's engineering, right? The principles are still the same, and I think how we apply those, the DevOps practices or how we set up guardrails, the domain is going to change a little bit, but I think it's still going to be lots of thought and putting. I think in the past 3 months, I think there's been a bit of a parade, and I keep saying it's coming a little bit to the end. Okay, now we're going to go back to being engineers. God forbid we ever go back to putting hands on the keyboards, but
you can ask about prompts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
You'll just use voice.
Just stop getting my nails done.
But any final thoughts or final questions or just things that they want to say? Mitch, you got one?
Yeah, well, I might have missed if there's a baby over here. So.
No, it's all good. I thought that was you.
It was both.
Mitch took token usage and just started crying.
So I feel like
So I can talk on two things, because one is there's always going to be like if you're with a customer, customers are still customers, right? You can't ever get and extract really good requirements from them. So the first one is like what's coming in can also be AI reviewed, and like put it in a dumb model. Do these requirements make sense, and do they cover edge cases? Like I've done that a couple different times on whether it's GitHub issues or stories of like, this doesn't, I can tell that this is not going to be enough for AI. Why don't you try to flesh out these edge cases? And then the second part, so the first thing I said was, the business consumer is still a business consumer, right? Extracting processes is still a hard thing to do, right? To be able to know, waterfall doesn't work because waterfall is, have all the things up front, and in 6 months we'll go down the road. But you can get a little closer to waterfall because the iteration cycle is a lot faster, right? If you know a lot of things, and by the end of the week you could have something that someone can see, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds of agile and waterfall. So there's a little bit of that of like, right now we can just prototype as much as we want and then show people and iterate in prototypes, but I think a lot of it is, the requirements are still text. Text can still be thrown through AI. But then second is if better prompts and better upfront context gets you better outputs, then sometimes AI is not the right tool to explore business options, right? That's where you still have to be a proactive developer. That was my answer.
I was just saying, that's something I just have to be better at, because like I said in my talk, I'm bad at doing the /plan and stuff like that, but that was one thing that I noticed that I really liked about Kiro was it started to force me into that, was I sat there and I said, hey, instead of, because it gave you you had a vibe mode and you had a, well, let's do it for real mode type of thing, right? And I've been going down that vibe coding train for so long just because it's been easy to do, and like Dan was saying, just quick iterations, where once I start to go, oh, what is this other path that I can take? Oh, look, I can do a plan, and I mean, and like I said too, the thing that was nice was that Kiro even kind of at the top shows you, like walks you through, here's your requirements gathering, here's its to-do list. I mean, it kind of walks you through and you get a different markdown file for each one, and just getting that mindset of, okay, before I say, write a whole app for me, let me actually define what I want that app to be instead of, I think this is what I want, and oh no, just kidding. Yeah, so I think that'll, just kind of doing the planning up front more, and that's a mindset I need to get into, because I was kind of just trying to do the quick iteration and go, nope, just kidding, that was horrible. Yeah, put thought into it ahead of time, which is going to be painful, but I think I can do it. So yeah.
It depends as well, what kind of level of relationship with your customer structurally you have, because you start throwing these tools at the business requirements, then sooner or later you're going to start sitting around in a cycle where you're forgetting about the code, you're just iterating purely on business process engineering, right? And the model is inevitably going to say, well, why don't you just inject a model into this and replace those 7 people, thanks.
Right. Yeah.
And to what extent your customer is open to that, and obviously many, CEOs can't wait to rip your hand off to do that, and
Right.
other people are, thinking about this more from a slightly more humanist point of view. And so a lot of that is starting to get quite complicated, I think, once you move it up the chain.
Yeah.
I was going to say shift left, but I'd have to shoot myself.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, so one thing is we've seen our meetings, it feels like the meetings have increased. But I think what's actually happened is it's the same meetings just compressed into a tighter time frame, right? Like before we might, plan out 2 weeks, a month worth of work items, right? But we've seen our team chug through work items so quickly, we've had to say, no, we're actually going to do more refinement meetings, right? Or more planning up front because the team is getting through more tickets quicker. And we've put, I don't want to say more detail, more explicit detail maybe in there, because quite often, like at least for me, I'm going to have Copilot YOLO the first rev of the thing, right? I'm going to fire it up and then, okay, no, I realized that, that wasn't explicit, because like the items are usually not written to that level of detail to where I trust that it's exact, right? There's always tribal knowledge that's, inferred or known. And it's nice when that's captured, but we don't have a repos in the state where all of that's in a state where it can be reasonably inferred. But at least getting it better to the point where it can start doing some of that. I think the other thing, I was talking to another architect friend, and he made the comment that they've taken all decisions that require empathy away from AI. Because because AI will make a very logical decision in some cases, logical, right? But it feels mechanical in a lot of ways, and any decision that requires a level of empathy, no, right? At best, it can provide like a summary or maybe a hint in a direction, but they've taken away all of the empathetic level decisions because, yeah, you let AI go and it's going to do something that, you know, you're going to just kill off the whole human race and let me run things, right? Great, not what we're going for. And so I think also maybe a decision, kind of like you were saying, Gareth, of some people are very open to let's let AI run the whole company, and other people are more like, no, we still need to have, there's some things that we just don't let the AI decide on, right? Like there's a human element here, like even like hiring things are similar, right? There was one person we hired here, and the comment was from the CEO was, I wish I could tell you what I saw in him during the interview, because if I could figure out what that thing was, I'd try to bottle it up. But it was one of those, there was something extra there that was seen with that human interaction in the interview that would not have been picked up by AI. And so I think making sure that where the decision requires empathy, that we limit its usage appropriately. Unless I'm insulting AI, and then that's legit.
There's no empathy
There's
required.
no empathy required. I'm perfectly happy to tell it how I feel. And yes, I will spend tokens to make sure it gets it through its head how I feel about it.
That's almost free therapy.
Yes, it feels good for me.
It used to be free therapy, now it costs quite a few bucks.
Well, if there's nothing else, I really appreciate everyone coming and everyone engaging in the discussion. It's interesting, it's scary, and it's an exciting time. It's all three wrapped up. So thank you, and we'll probably see each other in 6 months talking about vastly different things. But
I said we're doing this talk once a month now because that's how quickly it's going.
yeah, exactly. Well,
Well, now,
in 2 months.
I know we talked about that now, but now.
I've updated my thing twice since I've stood up there. Nothing keeps appearing.
And there is pizza and snacks and stickers, so please take them on the way out. I don't want it. I can't. But thanks for all coming.
Yes.
Oh, you